Hey, it's Hannah. I'm excited to be making a video for Astronomy 101. Have you ever wondered how tides work? Everyone seems to know that moon phases and tides have something to do with one another, but what's the relationship all about? My lab helped me to understand this relationship a lot better. Newton's law of gravity is the underlying influence in this relationship. To investigate, I collected information and made a line graph with dates on the x-axis and tide range on the y-axis. Then I labeled each moon phase as it occurred. Ultimately, the graph shows two trends. First, during full moon and new moon phases, there is great tidal variation, while during quarter moon phases, there is less tidal variation. The moon and Earth have a special relationship. Gravity attracts them to one another. As Newton showed us, the force of gravity is proportional to the product of the two masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Since the Earth and Moon are mass-like any other objects, the relationship is governed by distance and mass. Simply put, the law means with more mass there is more force, with more distance there is less force. The moon pulls on Earth just as the Earth pulls on the moon. The center of gravity makes both spheres elongated, as their near sides are attracted with greater force than their opposing sides. Because the oceans of Earth are liquid, they elongate, moving toward the center of gravity, toward the moon. The moon, while solid, also moves towards the center of gravity, toward the Earth. The moon is said to be tidal locked to the Earth from this attraction. Interestingly enough, this is a contributing factor to why we only see one face of the moon as it orbits around Earth. The elongation of Earth's oceans create our experienced high tides and low tides. At this point in my investigation, I was pretty convinced that the tides simply followed the moon. But then when I got back around to looking at the data, it became obvious that this explanation didn't show the differences in tidal range variation. There had to be something more. The sun. The sun is another member of the relationship that influences tides. As any other huge mass, or as a huge mass itself, obviously the sun exerts an influence on the tides of Earth. But just as the law of gravity would predict, the huge distance between Earth and the sun makes the gravitational force between the two a lot less than the force between the moon and Earth. Nevertheless, the influence and relationship with the sun is important. The sun either enhances or diminishes the moon's influence. Looking at neap tides, when the sun, moon, and Earth make a 90-degree angle, the moon and sun's gravitational influence oppose one another. The tide ranges vary by only a little. We see high tide, low tide, low tide. The interaction between opposing gravitational forces can be seen during first quarter and last quarter phases. Remember how our data showed little variation during first quarter and last quarter phases? In contrast, the sun enhances the moon's gravitational influence when all three members are aligned. The sun and moon work together to pull the influence tide to a dramatic extent. These tides result in extreme high tides and low tides and are called spring tides, but have nothing to do with the season. These tides can be experienced at full and new moon phases. Through this investigation, I was able to explain exactly how tides work, and now I have a greater understanding of why we see such trends in tidal variation. With new moon and full moon phases, we saw a lot of variation in the tides. But with first quarter moon and last quarter moon phases, we didn't see very much variation at all. It appears that it's just Newton's application of gravity, and it's awesome that we can apply it to something we experience every day. Obviously these drawings weren't to scale, but I did try my hardest to make them exemplary. Also, it's important to note that there are many other tidal influences like rain and earthquakes that deserve some attention when discussing tide range